Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. It's a Thursday. I'm joined by JP Mason. And it doesn't feel that long since I was on because I was covering the game last night. JP, you were there. Give me your wee brief overview of how it went last night. How did you think we played?
It was the first time I'd been back at Fir Park since February 5th, 2020. So it was difficult to get a ticket last season. First of all, the first game was the COVID thing was still in place. I think Celtic were using the away stand as a dressing room or something like that. If memory serves me correctly. Seems so bizarre to talk about things like that going on still in football, but wasn't that long ago. So yeah, that's when I ended up having my spat with Alan Burrows on Twitter. When I tagged him and he replied back about 3 tweets, and then I get absolutely jumped upon calling me an entitled Celtic fan because I wanted to see my team play football and not look at a bunch of empty seats on the telly. But he did it. To be fair to Alan Burrows, he did explain himself and what he was trying to do long term. That didn't look like it was working last night by the attendance from the home end. And I know it was a 6:15 kick-off and all the rest of it, but what makes Celtic fans so different to Motherwell fans that we can, arrange our lives to get to a 6:15 kick-off and Motherwell fans can't. So anyway, regardless of that, the team turned up in a big way last night. Yeah, it took us a while to get a goal before half time, but you felt it was coming. And I think my friend Chris said that he thought there was going to be wholesale changes last night. I really didn't expect there to be a kind of shadow side last night, because I think you only had to look at what they did on Sunday against Rangers. They put up a decent performance, and I think it was potentially a banana skin depending on what Celtic side we put out. So we put out a really strong side and took it seriously, and we've got ourselves into another semi-final at Hampden, which seems like ages away right now, but I'm sure January will come round very quickly, as time seems to be moving so fast at the moment in every other aspect of life. So we'll be at Hampden in no time. And
just wait till we get to 40, mate. It gets even quicker.
Well, I'm long past that.
Are you? Oh, see, that's a compliment. That's a compliment, JP. Right? I didn't think you'd hit the big 4-0 yet.
Oh, that's long gone. But but I was really pleased with last night, and Leah Labada again turning up with a couple of goals, but not much else. He's a mercurial figure that just seems to score goals and doesn't really give you that, a performance where you come away going, "Oh, how good was Abada tonight?" You just go away going, "That's Abada scored another 2 goals," and I'm not complaining, by the way. It's just the way that he is.
Well, I know that you use social media and you are on Twitter, and I think that in terms of comedy gold, Twitter's up there, right? I mean, we know that social media is different. Facebook's a different world than Twitter, etc. But you follow certain pages that give you brilliant comedy, brilliant videos. You know the ones I'm talking about. And one that I think is supremely good is Football Tweets. Do you follow Football Tweets with their artwork? I'm going to give the full credit before I bring this up so that they don't think we're ripping them off in any way, shape or form. But let's talk about the first goal. And this is the way that Football Tweets would describe it. There you go. There he is, ghosting it in with the cross in from Taylor. JP, he's got a certain style. He or she, I'm not sure who it is that does the artwork. But there's the first goal. And they call him the ghost because, like you say, just seems to ghost out of nowhere. Back post seems to be his favoured area to ghost in at, and he gets the first goal. Let's talk a wee bit about that then, because up until that point, it was quite frustrating in the first half, JP. I wasn't at the game, I was covering it here. Was there any kind of sense? I didn't sense that, didn't sense any real tension. I could hear the Celtic fans singing non-stop. Was there any kind of sense that if Motherwell get to half-time tonight, this could be that potential banana skin you were talking about? But if we get that first goal, the floodgates would open. That's the kind of impression I was getting.
I wasn't expecting a 3 or a 4, I have to be honest, but there definitely didn't seem to be any a fear, that we were going to come a cropper last night. I think Ange Postecoglou said it in his post match that our passing was really good, and it was. There was a real kind of, I don't know. It didn't feel like anything that at any point we were going to go off the rails in that game. And I thought Aaron Moy was excellent. Again, there's been a lot of detractors, people prepared to die in a hill for their stance against Aaron Moy, but
I know.
I'll never understand why people dig their heels in on certain players, whoever it may be, because ultimately a Celtic player has the jersey and has the ability to put that jersey on and prove me, you, whoever else sits here talking about them wrong, and you end up looking kind of foolish if you sort of go after someone in a particular way, and that's why you always just let the football do the talking and let the players do the talking, rather than be so desperate to write players off because you want to be right about something. And it seems to be quite common in the current climate. Not just Celtic fans, anybody about anything. They just let people like to be right. I'd prefer to just sort of keep my mouth shut until such time as you can review someone at the end of a season and go, well, that person's not contributed. They probably don't deserve to get a new contract based on that or something like that. But while we're in the thick of it and the games are coming as fast as they are, you're looking for everybody to contribute, and that's starting to happen. James McCarthy coming on so far out of the picture, comes on last night again and gets minutes, and Forrest at the weekend as well. How many times has Forrest been written on? The comments on this, when we've been talking about it, people coming up going, Forrest is done, get him out, and you bring the comment up, you start talking about it, and then people tell you you're deluded because you're backing James Forrest, a guy who's now scored 100 goals for Celtic. He's done that since last week, and he's one assist away from 100 assists. We've been at pains to point that out to people, but people just stick their head in the sand and go, nah, he's not good enough. Shouldn't be at Celtic, all this.
The thing is, right, I mean, obviously football's changed. The way we watch it, the way we comment on it has changed. I mean, we've always had, as football fans, a reactionary view and way to express our feelings on who's played well, who's played badly, manager out, sack the board. We've had all that kind of stuff over the year, but the difference now, JP, is that you have the power to broadcast it. Now, you broadcast it by doing something like what we're doing now and streaming it live. You can broadcast it on your social media channels. People can gather an incredible amount of people, followers on social media that you would never be able to gather in real life, if that's still a thing, where you'll never know 20,000 people, but you might have 20,000 followers online. And sometimes I get the impression, and I don't feel the need to do that, maybe I have in the past, but sometimes I think people with a big following feel the need to, or they feel like an obligation to make a comment on everything. So if you comment on Celtic and something happens, you must make a comment. And sometimes I don't think there's the process of thinking that comment out. So sometimes it's a knee-jerk reaction to a signing, a performance, etc. I don't ever feel the need to make that comment. I'd much rather go away and think about it and probably share my thoughts on the broadcast, because you get a time to come back and sometimes watch the game back, for example. So there's a few players, I think, in that bracket. So we signed Moy, and it was far from a marquee signing, JP, right? But we'd already signed Jota and Cameron Carter-Vickers. And the broadcast we had done leading up to those two signings were, I don't think we'll get both of them. Who would you prefer? That was the kind of chat. That was the discussion. We got both of them. So I think that when you go out and you get your two priority signings, there are going to be other guys that are going to be brought in as squad players. And I think that's what Moy was. So when he signed, I'm looking at him going, okay, there's some attributes he's got that we've maybe lost with Rogic leaving. There's some attributes he's got that we've probably lost with Beaton leaving. He's maybe more of an all-rounder than both of those two guys. And I think that in time, because obviously he hadn't been training full-time, he might have been training on his own, but I don't think that's ever going to be as intense as doing a pre-season for a team. So it's taken him a wee while. He had a bad performance against St Mirren, but I keep saying it, no one could cover themselves in glory that day. And I think in the last couple of games, what we've seen from Moy is exactly what he can bring to the table. He's not a first pick, JP, but you put him in a game like last night, and he's going to do an excellent job for you. And I think there's going to be an importance on guys like him, who maybe at the end of the season, you look at how many games they've played, not all starts, and they might have between 25, 30 appearances, mainly from the bench. But these guys are vital to the squad, to the makeup of the squad. And for such occasions where someone like Callum McGregor gets an injury, or McGregor suspended, which he was for the first game that he missed through injury. But, these things are going to happen. We've got situations like last night where Giakoumakis comes on and it looks as though he injures himself. And straight away you're thinking, who's our backup? We don't actually have one. Out-and-out striker. We're going to have to start playing people out of position. So I think Moy has been...
Or recall Albion Ayeti from his glittering loan period where he's got 2 and 2 for Sturm Graz.
It's incredible when, again, and I've done it, you've probably done it, you criticise a player. And I've been privileged enough to speak to ex-Celtic players, and what they continually tell you, and they'll slag off this one and that one, no one's there that isn't an excellent footballer. But Celtic sometimes can swallow players up, JP, and a lot of experienced players have told me this, that you've got a guy who's got the ability, but coming to Celtic and the demands that you have as a Celtic player, where every game, let's be honest, every game has to be won. A draw is never good enough. And a lot of people can't, live up to those demands. Is Albion Ayeti murder at football? Of course he isn't. Of course he isn't. But he's maybe not made for Celtic. So he goes away to Sturm Graz and he's scoring goals. Mikey Johnston's scoring goals. Connor Hazard's winning leagues for Helsinki.
And player of the season.
Player of the season. So it might just be, we can be harsh, we can be brutal. That's part of football, right? And it's part of being a fan. You can be brutal about players. But they're no bad players. It's just not worked out at Celtic. It just hasn't worked out.
Yeah, to be fair to Ange Postecoglou, there's not many in the current squad that you could honestly say, oh, we need to get rid of him or we need to get rid of him. He's sorted out what the situations were players where clearly things weren't working out either for them as people in Scotland, Glasgow and Celtic, and he's moved them on and he's managed to get them, out the door. And that sounds really brutal and harsh, but it has to be, the amount of money that we were paying out to these guys was sucking the money away from what could be distributed elsewhere on a Aaron Moy or a Moritz Jens or somebody that could come in and play 1 out of every 2 games or 1 out of every 3 games, because obviously Starfelt you would expect to come back in whenever he's fit again to the centre of defence, and obviously McGregor's been the captain. He'll come back in when his injury subsides. But I think the idea, I've seen people calling Moy Ange's pet in comments. It's so disrespectful. It's like, why is he Ange's pet? Why is Kyogo not Ange's pet? Why is any player that Ange's brought in not? Why is it specifically Aaron Moy? Why have you gone after him with that comment? And then as well as that, people were just kind of thinking, oh well, because he's been playing in China, that's ripped up his career and he's not allowed the opportunity to play for a top European club. And Celtic, I just think it's wild how people think sometimes, but you can't. The only way you can change people's opinions is performing, and it's really been good to see Aaron Moy play well in the last few games in a different position as well. Not the position that I think everybody, myself included, thought he was going to play in the holding role. I didn't expect him to play further up the park, but he's shown just how. There was guys next to me last night even going, "How slow is he, man?" The guy next to me just like berating him for his lack of pace. But when you've got the footballing brain that he has and he can spray passes around like that, do you really need to be, like a lightning bolt in the middle of the park? I don't think you do. You've got other people around about you to do your running for you.
Yeah, and the experience with that, what should happen is it should bring, a positional awareness as well. JP. So you are in that right place, and you're not having to hurtle back to try and catch up with the game as it kind of rushes past you, kind of thing. And I think so far, yeah, there was one bad performance in Paisley, but I think so far Moy has been a real shrewd acquisition. There's going to be some interesting times ahead. There's a few challenges that I don't think Ange has dealt with quite yet at Celtic. That there's a real knack for a manager to know when a player's time is up at a club, and I don't mean they're finished as a footballer. And I think I'm going to use Alex Ferguson as an example for this one, JP. So often he would move players on who you thought were at the peak of their powers, and you often thought it was the wrong time, but what do we know? Fergie done all right. But he did move players on when they were still like massively in demand, but he knew that the time was right. You know, there is a timing, and it could be that the player, we saw it when the players' heads left the building. You made the comment famously, and their boots should do the same. And they're not giving you 100%. They're not 100% buying into what Ange is delivering. We're not there yet. I think we've got a squad that's been completely galvanised by the Ange effect. Everybody is bought into it. But we had that same kind of vibe when Brendan Rodgers came into the club. There's the klaxon going off for Brendan. But eventually it happened with him. You've got players like Boyata refusing to play European games. It eventually did happen. You've got the spat with Moussa Dembele. If you had told me after the Dembele derby that would happen with Dembele, I mean, how disappointing, you wouldn't have believed it. But that's football. That's modern football. So it's great at this moment in time that we've got all this plethora of talent, and they're all buying into what Ange is selling. They're all buying into Celtic. They've all made that step up, be that Carter Vickers, who didn't know where his home was. He was a nomadic footballer. We were his 7th loan club, his 8th club in total in his early 20s. You had Jota, who had been heralded as the next Portuguese wonder kid. Didn't quite work out. Couldn't really establish himself at Benfica. So he's come in. So these people have made that step up, JP. So they're not yet thinking or looking over their shoulder as to where the interest is. You've got Matt O'Reilly, third-tier English football this time last year, now playing in the Champions League against Luka Modric. So we're not there yet, but that challenge will be facing Ange at some point. It'll be interesting to see if he still has that, if he's got that instinct to know, right, this player's time's up, it is time for him to move on. Because that was one of the biggest mistakes we made with some of the want-away players, wasn't it? In the bad old season, the COVID season.
Yeah, hanging on to guys that was a little bit out of our hands. I've spoken about that before in terms of the transfer market that summer, which was stagnated and not the same transfer market as it would have been any other year without a global pandemic, where people aren't shelling out the same sort of. Well, people aren't shelling out anything really. You look back at the transfers in that summer, and money was not flying around as it normally would be, and certainly there would not be as much risk taken on players from no disrespect to our own league, but from the Scottish League. Anybody that was spending money that summer, if at all, it was going to be on certainties, not on gambles. And Ryan Christie going to Bournemouth, would you say that was a gamble? Probably a little bit of a gamble in that, but it was low risk because they didn't pay a big fee for him, did they? So
it's like 2.5, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And it was just a weird time, and we did hang on to players that could have and should have left the building a lot sooner, and we would have freshened up the squad in a way that would have allowed us to have a better stab at that season. But just on O'Reilly, I thought he was brilliant last night. I thought he really, was always looking for the ball and just calmed the midfield down a lot. Really, really good to see. I know we weren't exactly playing in a cauldron of an atmosphere, but just for his own development as well, to get games like last night under his belt, where he's properly running the midfield, and that goal from Hatate was just the rollover. I remember seeing Henrik Larsson doing that against Kilmarnock in the final of the League Cup, if I remember rightly. He did it to Gordon Marshall. Remember he did that rollover for it. I'm pretty sure it was for his hat trick. Did the roll over the ball and finish with his other foot.
Yep.
He also scored against an ex school. I was going to say school pal. He wasn't in my year. He was a couple of years older than me, but a guy called Chris Innes ended up playing for Kilmarnock against Henrik Larsson in that cup final, and Larsson scored one of his hat-trick in off Chris Innes. Like, just kind of hit it, and it just took a slight dink, which went over the keeper. Which I was just cool to see somebody that I kind of half knew from school playing in a cup final, and I knew he was a Celtic fan as well, so it probably would have. I don't know what the psyche's like for someone in that position where they're playing against the team that they support, but for the club that they're being paid.
It's very interesting, that, JP. Very interesting indeed, because there are moments where, like you've mentioned a couple of times, Mark Burchill was one of your contemporaries, right? And he went on. Actually, that top over your shoulder reminds me of Mark Burchill. And you come through schools football and all that, and you play with some right good players, and a few of them actually make it and as professionals, and you do pick up a few wee tales. But that's one of the things I used to always ask in terms of the effort, etc. And generally what I've been told is that you would try harder because there was still that dream in your mind that you might play for the team that you support, so you wanted to show a good impression. But there was also a football team that a pal of mine played for who were, let's just say, there were quite a few fans of a certain team in Glasgow. Mm-hmm. And there were comments after a particular defeat that would suggest that they didn't try a leg.
Oh, right.
So, it's something that you hope the professionalism prevails in most cases. And you also hope that, if you're a Celtic fan playing against Celtic, then proof does that you're good enough. So you just have to look at things like, listen, you're not going to want reminded of this, but Scott McDonald was a lifelong Celtic fan, right? Johnny Doyle was a lifelong Celtic fan and turned it on when he played for Ayr United against Celtic. Andy Lynch, mad Celtic fan, so when he played for Hearts against Celtic, he wanted to impress. And you speak to these people, and that's what they want to do. And you hope that is a professional approach that most footballers would take, JP. You would hope. But there's going to be occasions.
I mean, I've not seen Chris Innes for years, but I would love to know how he reflects upon that game, and if he's disappointed at the fact that they lost, or if he's proud of the fact that he played against Henrik Larsson and holds his hands up to say, well, Henrik Larsson scored one of the best Celtic players of all time. I was in the opposition team that he scored a hat-trick against in a cup final.
One of the best ones, though, right? And I'm going to bring this up because I wanted to ask you about Frank McGarvey, right? Because obviously last week was a very emotional week for Frank and his family, and anybody who watched that video, I challenge you to watch that and get caught up in the emotion of it. But one story that Frank told, which I thought was pretty funny, was around Love Street 86. And there are Hearts players to this day, every so often on an anniversary, there'll be a newspaper piece and the Hearts player, and laid into Celtic and all this nonsense, right? And Frank McGarvey, I remember speaking to him, and I'm pretty sure this podcast is probably on our YouTube channel. It's probably on our YouTube channel as an audio. So, back in the day, and I'm interviewing Frank way back, a few years ago, and he said, and I spoke about that, it must have been around about one of the anniversaries, and he says, I think it's ridiculous. It really is ridiculous, Paul, that, people would suggest that a professional footballer wouldn't try because they were, they come from a Celtic background or they support the club. He says, but what I would say, the champagne in the Celtic dressing room after that Love Street game was delicious. And I just thought, that is typical Frank. Get it up them, because he was the Celtic contingent were getting abuse from the Hearts players that week in the press. But Frank McGarvey, it's taken me on to speak about Frank. It was really emotional to see him at Celtic Park, wasn't it? And you your thoughts and prayers continually go out to him and his friends and his family.
Well, you know him personally, don't you? I mean, he's been in and around the studio a number of times and been on the shows and things like that. And it was just a bit before my time in terms of being a Celtic supporter. I think obviously he scored an 85 final.
Yeah, yep.
And that's just a little bit too far back for me in terms of what I can remember growing up. But certainly I've seen the footage, and you know when someone is a Celtic fan, and that guy is 100% a Celtic fan. Just the way he was speaking and how emotional he was at the opportunity to get to speak to the fans at this horrendous point in his life, where he's battling cancer, as so many other people have, and continue to do. It's horrendous thing, and my heart went out to him when I saw that video, especially when it's someone that's not too disconnected to your own personal life. I mean, obviously you know him, so therefore there's a bit more of a familiarity in terms of him as a person now, and not the player that he was for Celtic. But he's part of that club, isn't he? He scored 100 goals for Celtic, and when someone gets to that lofty position, they're just etched forever in Celtic history.
Yeah.
As is James Forrest now as well. So the people that are on a higher plane within the Celtics history.
We were talking yesterday. John Hughes and I were talking about what even is a legend. It's just a word that we use all the time when we're talking about football. Who are the legendary figures? Well, there's a lot, in the history books at Celtic, but it's sometimes difficult to quantify, isn't it? But I think what I was trying to say is that how can you argue about James Forrest being a Celtic legend or a Celtic great when you look at what he has contributed over a period of 14 seasons? And I don't think anything's been mentioned, JP, about a testimonial, but that must be part of that latest deal. There must be a testimonial written into that as well, which, these things are becoming more and more rare. But, I mean, who would be more deserving than James Forrest of a testimonial?
How could he not get one? I know I saw some people saying, no, they're outdated now, and you can't outdate the fact that someone's been at a club for more than 10 years. You can't just sort of dance around that fact, whether he is Mr. Popular within the Celtics. Well, I think you saw the reception he got at the weekend. I think this sort of myth that he's not widely liked or loved by the Celtic support is probably there to be dispelled. I think there's definitely an element of the Celtic support I've seen, whether it's online or whatever, that kind of make snide comments about James Forrest, despite his length of service and despite his contribution. Well, what's he ever done and all this sort of stuff? You're like, take James Forrest out of the equation in the last 10 years or more since he's been there, and review Celtic's situation without James Forrest and without some of the goals he scored at crucial times, whether it's in big games or the so-called not so big games. A 3 points away at Hibs or Tynecastle or whatever ground you want to pick, you want to choose, is just as important as the 3 points you get at Ibrox. So I don't buy into this. Oh well, he's not done it consistently on the big stage, in the big games. As long as someone is contributing regularly, which he has done, then it gets my praise, my whatever else you want to call it. How could you not?
You imagine as well, though, JP, right? Being James Forrest, right? He made his debut when he was 17, right? And just being that wee guy for, the school, or that wee guy for the scheme, and all of a sudden you're a Celtic player. And what you see is him growing up in a Celtic jersey. He's just a bairn. He's 17. You see him now, he's in his early 30s, and you've seen him develop as a player mainly, because we didn't see him off the park. But one of the things I found pretty funny, again, Twitter, the glory of Twitter, because if it's been recorded or documented, somebody will find it and put it out there. And it's the interview he was giving with Summer Harrell. And what are you up to this afternoon? Nando's. Do you fancy it? Just a wee Wido, eh? Just a wee Wido. Brilliant.
It's Scotland international as well, by the way.
I know. And he's heading towards 50 caps. He is. He's heading towards 50 caps for Scotland as well. And absolutely,
people are so quick
stellar.
to downplay. It's just, I get it. It's a Scottish way, isn't it? People are so quick to downplay great achievement. And to them, that's just like, well, so what? He's got nearly 50 caps for Scotland. Well, so he scored 100 goals for Celtic. I could score 100 goals for Celtic.
My nan could. 500 games, yeah, that's a biggie as well. Always gone about this 500 club, but there's only a dozen players ever made it in there. I think the 13th player was Scott Brown, actually. So to get into that, you're up there with the greats. You're up there with the absolute icons of Celtic Park. So he's heading towards that as well, JP. Callum McGregor will probably get there as well.
Do you think there was a bit of controversy about the fact that he didn't get a game? What was your thoughts about the fact that he didn't get a game last night after scoring a hat-trick at the weekend? I know I think everybody and their dog expected him to start last night based on the weekend's performance, but then the flip side to that would be, is he being kept for Tynecastle on Saturday?
I think it's brilliant management by Ange, because he's trying to ensure that enough game time is in every player's legs. So, based on performance, Ralston, Burnaby and Forrest should have all started last night, because I thought they were all really, really good against Hibs. But, what Ange is doing there is, I just think he's making sure everybody, when required, is ready and they're no ring rusty, Forrest, he's probably at a stage where he wouldn't be up nor down. I'm pretty sure that he would rather play, but I was surprised. But we'll talk about Abada, the guy that played on the right, as well. I'm keen to bring in some of the thoughts of the commenters. We've got Stephen Pearson. Is that a Celtic polo shirt? Kind of bumblebee style. That's pretty smart, that. Or it might be a supporters club.
I think, yeah.
Smart nonetheless. Playing fantastic, fast and slick moving football. A joy to watch, it really is. The one comment I would make about that jersey over your shoulder, and Jungle Lion brings it up. When you look at a jersey, it does remind you of moments in Celtic's history. That is one of the moments against Leon away, which, people go on about Inverness Cali ending John Barnes' career as a Celtic manager and stuff, but there was a few other things that happened obviously leading up to that, and that was one of the big ones. It does remind me of that moment as well. One thing I would have done to improve that jersey, JP, would have been, the badge, the crest. I would have had a full colour crest. I would have had a full colour crest.
Is that commented upon in the forthcoming book?
That's my critique. That is my critique on that jersey. It would have gone so much better with the black, white and green 4-leaf clover. There you go. Yeah. Other than that, a classic jersey.
Do you know, just when we're on the subject of that season, or those 2 seasons where we had that strip, do you know what happened on this day, 1998, in the UEFA Cup?
Okay.
Do you know that we were playing?
1998.
We played at Celtic Park.
Was it Croatia Zagreb?
No. That was the season before that, because I think we'd signed Viduka at this, or had we signed Viduka at this point? No,
Liverpool.
Croatia Zagreb was Champions League qualifier, and we got beat in that, and then that was from winning the league. So we must have somehow ended up in the UEFA Cup.
I said Liverpool. No, Janssen was away by this time in '98, wasn't it?
FC Zurich.
Oh, was it Zurich under Joe Venglos? Was it?
Aye, but Zurich. I watched the Little Z highlights this morning, and Tom Boyd gets sent off after a horrendous mistake from Jonathan Gould. Gould came out, clattered into the striker, missed the ball, and then the striker had an empty net to hit into it, and Tom Boyd absolutely full stretch dived and handballed it to stop it going in and got a straight red.
Took one for the team, didn't he?
I can't believe it was 24 years ago.
Oh, that's incredible.
It's terrifying that it's that long ago. But I watched the Little Z highlights and Boyd.
Did I tell you the story about Tom Boyd? I spoke to him recently. Did I tell you that? No. Right.
Well, because he did the forward, didn't he?
Yeah. Aye. So this is my 4th book, and I've never had a forward. Now, the reprint of Celtic Smile, or the Neely Mockin story, does have a forward, but it's not been released yet. And that's the forward was by John Clark. So this one that's coming out, I thought Tom Boyd would be great, because he's a Celtic ambassador, he's an ex-captain, and he's a mad Celtic fan. So not only do you get recollections of the jerseys he wore as a player, you get recollections of the jerseys he wore as a fan. You know what I mean? But it was just one of these interesting things. So what we needed for the actual forward was Tom's signature so that we could scan it in, and then the designer would drop it into the book, and it's just like a nice wee, first couple of pages, there's Tom Boyd's forward, there's his signature. So I said to him, any chance we could maybe meet up and I'll get your autograph? And we met, right, on the flyover at Harthill Services. It looked like the worst drug deal ever. And it's bucketing down with rain, right, on some nondescript Tuesday afternoon. And there's me and Tom Boyd exchanging autographs, you know what I mean? But it just didn't look right, JP. It looked a bit the things you do to try and pull a book together. Aye. Brown packages and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Jungle Lion comes back in again. Ruthless on Saturday will do the trick. Yeah, it's another challenge against a side that I don't think are firing on all cylinders. And the tagline would suggest Celtic are now. Because again, we went through, I don't know how long it was, 2 or 3 weeks there, JP, where people were getting a bit concerned, weren't they, about the form. And I think we're blowing the cobwebs away last night and against Hibs, haven't we?
I think so, yeah. I think when you looked at the stats guys were coming up with the XG and how many chances we were creating.
Sorry, can I stop you for a minute, right? Okay, so that's what normal podcasts talk about. What do we do when we're analysing football games? When, we don't have heat maps and stuff, to look at. What we do is we bring up that. There's your analysis, right there. There's Hatate's goal. That's how we did it.
It's succinct and it tells the story.
Look at Kelly. Look at Kelly. He's like a dead fly sitting there.
He was there, certainly done up well, but his feet were so quick. I was in the top tier, and I'd been told on the way in, you can't see anything from the top tier. I saw everything. I don't know what the issue was in the top tier at Fir Park that we get. I managed to see it all. I don't know. I know I'm 6'2", but I didn't think that my height gave me any advantage over anybody else. I saw all the goals in the second half quite clearly.
I had one of my worst experiences ever at a football ground at Fir Park back in fact, it might have been 1990. It was either the late 80s or the early 90s. And I remember the overcrowding behind the goal was scary. It was frightening. I mean, it was a rubbish game. It was not an each, actually. And when we were leaving, me and my old fella, my feet left the ground several times within this crowd because I was just up against the body next to me. It was horrible, horrible situation. It does bring back every single time we play at Fir Park. That memory comes back to me because it shows you not that long ago, really, in the great scheme of things, JP, how bad football stadiums were back then. It was horrific. I mean, it was actually scary. But yeah, there's the analysis there. Hatate's goal, as drawn by Fitbar Tweets on Twitter. Check him out for a bit of humour.
Going back to that, we were talking about the level of chances that we created in those games where we weren't, blowing teams away, including in Champions League. We had plenty of chances in those games as well, and it's kind of frustrating that then all of a sudden we come along, we beat Hibs 6-1 out of nowhere. I don't think anybody, I'm sure somebody did bet it, but I don't think many in the support was expecting us to emphatically beat Hibs like that on Saturday. And even last night, you're expecting it to be a bit of a sticky, maybe 1-2, 1-0, 2-1, something like that, not a 4-0. So these chances that we're creating, I think Ange Postecoglou referred to it last night as well, saying, instead of going in, instead of hitting a post or we're making a great save, we're scoring the goals. Yeah. And Kyogo had plenty of chances in those games and hadn't got any, and then he got one last night. Fair enough, it was a relatively easy goal, but I think he probably needed that after quite a few, not terrible misses, but by his own standards, I think he would have probably expected to score 1 or 2 in the last 2 or 3 weeks rather than none. So there was maybe a bit of doubt creeping in about Kyogo and whether or not he had the minerals for, the nitty gritty at this point in the season where the games are coming thick and fast and the demands are that you're Celtic, your first choice Celtic striker, you need to be scoring goals and taking your share of the workload. You got one last night. I'm sure that'll serve him well going into Saturday. For Saturday's game, I despite anything that's going on at Tynecastle, whether their fans are bemoaning their style of play, their availability of players, whatever, they will muster a performance from somewhere on Saturday. I'm sure of it. They hate us. They absolutely hate us.
You know what I remember? Obviously, Kyogo and Tynecastle made his debut there, didn't he? You remember in the 2-1 game where we had a perfectly good goal chopped off that Abada scored and he was called offside. And of course, this weekend's game, that particular incident may well be reviewed on VAR as well. You know, and Stephen McLean.
Last night the last Celtic game before VAR.
Yeah, and McLean will be able to look at it and say it's still offside. So that'll be an interesting one. I was going to ask you though about Kyogo and Tynecastle. What was the feeling around the stands last night regarding Kyogo? Because, like, even last night in isolation, I think there were 3 chances you would expect Kyogo to score, and he didn't. Then what started to happen was things that you would expect from him, like he's holding up play, you know, that kind of thing, was being affected. He was losing the ball much more often than you would expect from him. And as an observer looking in, I'm looking at him going, you know, is it affecting his confidence now? Probably. Then he scores the goal and he's so relieved, but he's coming off the park and Postecoglou tells him, no, go back to the fans, and he does. So what was the feeling last night at the game, JP? Was there, wait a minute, he's just off it, hook him? I mean, what was the feeling around Kyogo? Because he is a fan's favourite, isn't he, overall?
Definitely. I don't think that's changed in any way. I think everyone, you know, wanted to celebrate with him when he was pushed forward by the manager at the end. I certainly did. I was delighted to see. He just loves it, doesn't he? He just loves being amongst Celtic. That loves the fans, loves the away support, loves the adulation. Hasn't probably experienced anything like that in his career so far. I don't want to be disrespectful to Vissel Kobe. Is that the name of the team that he played for? I think they have a decent fan base, but do they take thousands of people? Do they fill a full stand at an away ground in Japan on a Wednesday night at 6 o'clock? Probably not. And do they, you know, sing songs about every player? And I don't know. Maybe they do. Maybe I'm completely naive to that. I've never been to Japan. I'd love to go. I've said that before. It's one of the places I'd love to go. But I'm delighted that we have one of their finest exports and playing in our team at the moment. And you know, there's always this argument about Giakoumakis starting. He obviously started the weekend, got a couple of goals. It's a great problem to have 2 strikers that are totally different, but are both idolised by the support. There's not anybody that you could find that could say, "Oh, I think Kyogo's not that great. I think Giakoumakis should be playing all the time." It's a case of they want both of them to play, and both of them have shown that they're capable of doing it at the top. Maybe not at the top level. I'm yet to be convinced by Giakoumakis and Kyogo in the Champions League. I don't think either of them have covered themselves in glory. Really, you couldn't really say that they've lit it up. They've had the opportunities to do so, and they haven't done it. But it's no real slight on them because it's such a huge jump up in class and expectation. The demands at the Champions League are unforgiving. You don't get. You get 1 or 2 chances and that's it, and if you don't take them, then you'll be waiting until the next game, and that's what they found themselves in that situation. But the majority of our games, whether we like it or not, are in Scotland and against Scottish opposition.
Yeah,
that's a cold hard fact. And if they can do the business in those games, that's where we're going to get success, and that's where we're going to win more trophies than that mob.
You know, when we're talking about the Champions League and how some of the players, like you say, your star players, your best performers, maybe haven't lit it up. I agree with that. What does it take? So, at this moment in time, unless we come up with 2 off the scale, phenomenal performances and results in the next 2 Champions League games, JP, we're going to be bounced at the tournament. Okay, but what we've been trying to do this season,
Europe as well.
I know, and what we're trying to do throughout the season is say, well, Ange Postecoglou's never managed at that level, right? And the vast majority of Celtic players prior to this season haven't played at that level. So you get your 6 games under your belt, JP, and like you say, right, you're going to have to wait till next season to get another taste of this. Mm-hmm. Is that doable? Does the the adaptability aspect of a player playing at a higher level, are you able to do it where 6 games one season will be better next season? Or do you just think that some of them have taken to it, some of them have performed well? I mean, we've had some excellent performances from the likes of Hatate, for example, in Europe. I think Jota started coming into it a wee bit more, maybe after a few games.
But that's good, to be fair.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, I'm not writing this campaign off yet, because we might see something special from Kyogo and Giakoumakis in the next 2 games. Fair play. Mm-hmm. Would it be too late, do you think, if they haven't really performed in the 6 games? Do you then have doubts that will happen next season? Or if you flip that and say, well, that 6 games is a massive learning curve for them and they will be better the next time we have a campaign in the Champions League?
I would have thought so. I would have thought that within a professional footballer, especially if you take the 2 of them as individuals, Giakoumakis seems to be a pretty determined guy and focused, confident. That interview after St Johnstone, loved that when he said, I'm not acting like the big guy, but I don't want to sound like the big guy, but as soon as we put the ball down to take kick-off after their goal, all I could think about was scoring the winner and what it would feel like. And that's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I love that. As a Celtic fan, you love to hear chat like that, and that's the type of interview that will reverberate through time. If he manages to go on and score a lot more goals for Celtic and become, an iconic striker, I think he kind of is on his way to becoming that at the moment. What is he going to be? Is he going to be a Mark Viduka, or is he going to be a Henrik Larsson? Is he a guy that does it for a short period of time and then goes away, or is he going to be a guy that really gives the best years of his career to Celtic? So. But you've got guys like that, and I just think if it was me and I was in their position, my efforts would be doubled to make sure that I did score at that level, and I did prove myself, and I did score it in a game that means more to everybody because of the the outcome. I mean, if we somehow do manage to get results in those European games, to get European football after Christmas from where we are right now would be an unbelievable achievement, and it would be something that lifts their status in everyone's eyes, because it isn't just week in, week out in the Scottish tournaments. It's doing it at the highest level.
Yeah, and
where you make a name for yourself, I think.
It is, and everything. I mean, we talked about the depreciation and value of some of our assets, but global economics had a massive part to play in that because of COVID and everything else. JP, with Ayer and Edouard, when you look at the transfer fees that were discussed 12 months previously, and the teams compared to where they went and how much we actually got for them. But now you're looking at a situation where Celtic haven't really lit up the Champions League, but I absolutely agree with what Ange said when this was posted to him the other day there by one of the journals, and he basically said, no, we haven't been absolutely played off the park. We have competed. There have been very fine margins. So I think that the question I asked you about the players being able to adapt, when it's only a very short part of the season that they're getting to play at that level, I think Ange definitely will. I think whatever we learn from this campaign, he will build on that for next season. There might be some players that aren't able to take the step up. And then you've got guys like Hatate, who just seems to approach it like he's playing against anybody in the Scottish League, and he still performs. I think he's been really across the piece phenomenal in Europe, and I'm pretty sure that there will be loads of interest in players like him come the end of this campaign. IH decorating, as long as we don't lose any of them in January. IH decorating, Hearts and Livingston, bigger games now than Shakhtar. Would you agree with that? What's your thoughts there?
Well, they all, of course, though. I mean, but any of our league games right now are big because you don't want to lose any of our advantage ahead of the break. You want to either maintain that 2 point gap or increase it. So one of those games you drop points and Rangers win, then that gap's gone. So of course they're massive games, but I'm not going into the Shakhtar game thinking, this means nothing. I desperately want us to get 3 points because I think it would be deserved. I think we deserve more points than what we've got in this group. I know that might sound.
I agree with you.
But that might sound just like, oh, you're a Celtic fan. Of course you're going to say that. But I've been at both home games. I thought we were brilliant against Real Madrid in that first half.
Mm-hmm.
And I know being brilliant against a team and not scoring doesn't get you any points. But it feels like it's been a bit hard done by. Like the Joe Hart mistake. Why could that mistake not have come in a game where we had the ability to make up for that? We didn't have the ability to make up for that mistake in a game of that magnitude. There was no room for error in that game, and we made an error, and it gave them a goal at 1-1.
My point would be, JP, up to that moment, we're watching it and we're observing it, but again, it's backed up by the stats of the game. The data will tell you that the chances created by Celtic at that moment in time were more than those created by Leipzig, and more than what Celtic and Leipzig had created in the first game away from home. So at that point, Celtic were competing, and I think that's what Ange was saying. We were going toe-to-toe with Leipzig at that moment in time. Then, and by the way, when we've made that mistake, we've put them under some extreme pressure. We had the possession in the final third until that break occurred, and Joe Hart didn't deal with it. So I think that these are fine margins. People will just look at you and say you're bottom of the table potentially. You're bottom of the table. It's been a disaster, but Ange can't think like that, can he? He needs to look at these positives.
I don't look at this Champions League campaign so far, and the first word that comes to my head is not disaster. And is that green tinted specs? Is that
I don't
Celtic
think so.
bias? I don't know. I think if you weren't a Celtic fan and you were made to watch these games that we've played, Clockwork Orange style, sitting in the chair with the eyes propped open, and you were asked to make a judgment on what you thought about Celtic's play in those games, I would expect most people, if they're a football fan, to be like, aye, Celtic deserve more from these games, being pretty kind of unfortunate in terms of McGregor's shot off the bar, the Hart mistake. I know that they obviously had a couple of VAR goals chalked off, and people will point to that and saying we should have got scudded there, but we should have scored as well. 100% we should have scored a couple of goals there as well. So that game could have been 3 each or 4 each or something mad like that in a Kev Graham parallel universe. But I don't think of disaster. If we get beat at home of Shakhtar Donetsk, that's not disaster, but it's pushing it away from my thoughts on how we've gone in this group, because we should have beat Shakhtar in Poland. Definitely should have beat Shakhtar in Poland. Everyone said that. That was a universal kind of held belief after that game. There was nobody saying, oh, well, we were lucky to get away with a point there. Everyone kind of thought we should have won that game.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, and then this is the Shakhtar team that have beaten Leipzig and got a point against Real Madrid.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of shows how well we did do in that game. That we were all coming away saying we should have won it.
Disappointed away from home in the Champions League, in the first campaign in 5 years, right? So not only as a club are we really not au fait with the way that the Champions League is and the standard that's required. The group of players that Ange has assembled, I think in one of the games recently, I looked at that, and only Joe Hart, the last game, McGregor was missing in the last game, right? He wasn't he? The last European game. And only Joe Hart had played Champions League football prior to this season in the Celtic squad. He was the only guy on the pack. So we've got to give them a bit of leeway. And I'm being pretty positive about it, I've got to say. Bringing Ridiculizer in on the YouTube. If you haven't subscribed already, then please do so. We do produce content every single day. But this has given me a wee opportunity, actually, before I bring Ridiculizer in. We tend to stream during the week and film during the week. And we have a full-time videographer, Kelvin, who edits what we're doing and puts it out at the weekend. So we have 2 or 3 days a week where we've got fully produced video content. And that's where we get the opportunity to put on live bands, unplugged sessions. We go to festivals. We speak to ex-Celts, musicians, etc. So we spoke to a pal of yours last week, Stuart Braithwaite, frontman of Mogwai. Brilliant interview, because of the guest, obviously, but a brilliant interview. And that was going to go out on Sunday. And we had an unplugged session. It was all lined up to go out on Saturday. Unfortunately, due to something that happened at the beginning of the week, Kelvin is unable to complete them at this moment in time. He's not feeling too great. So we will keep you updated on that. We will continue to stream. But obviously, we're sending our positivity Kelvin's way, and hopefully he makes a full recovery. So if you're wondering where Stuart Braithwaite's interview is, it will come out. It's sitting there in the archive. It's sitting there ready to go. But I'm not that great at video editing. Kelvin is, and we're waiting on Kelvin coming back before we do that. And it's the same with the sessions. We might have to put them on hold, onto the back burner for a few weeks, JP. Unfortunately, because I love them. It's great. We've had the bands in. We've recorded it. But the man, the man who has that speciality isn't in the studio at this moment in time. So thoughts and prayers and wishes with Kelvin.
I saw you were down at Microdot the other day.
Yes, we did. That was actually on the way back from the destination we didn't get to. And we decided to go to Microdot. Listen, here you go. We're talking music.
Brian
sorry?
Was Brian there?
Well, this is the thing, right? So, we're going down next month to Salford Lads Club, right? Which is synonymous with Manchester Music and the Smiths, and because Brian's doing an event down there. Now, obviously, that was all kicked off with an event he did with you guys at King Tut's. He's got one that's sold out already at the Water Rats in London, and he's doing the third venue, which will be his 4th gig, and it's going to be at the Salford Lads Club. So we're going to go down to Salford and film it and do a video feature for Brian. So we were kind of in the area, and every time we go down south, I always say to the lads, when we're passing the Kendall sign, we really need to go to the Microdot Boutique. Like, I'm a massive fan of music from the 90s, such as The Verve, Oasis, Cast, all these bands that Brian worked with, Suede, and all the original artwork was done by Brian and all this kind of stuff. So, on the way up, I'm trying to cheer Stuart up, who's the other member of the team, and I'm saying, you know what, Brian knows everybody. There might be somebody in the shop. Liam Gallagher might have popped in for a cup of tea, or Richard Ashcroft might be looking for a brew. So lo and behold, we walk in and Tony McCarroll, the Oasis drummer, is in there with Brian Cannon having a cup of tea. Couldn't make it up. So obviously I fanboyed him and asked him loads of questions about back in the day. And we've got a wee photograph up at the fireplace, which is the same fireplace that was on the Definitely Maybe cover. So shameless plug for Brian at Microdot. It's in, what did I say? Kendall. It's in Kendall. The boutique guy. But the Salford Lads Club gig, I think the tickets go on sale 28th of October. It will sell out. It's only 100 capacity. But if you're into all that kind of stuff, I bought something for the studio, right?
The best picture.
The best picture. I got something else. Couldn't help myself. Super Furry Animals, front cover of Robin Friday flicking the V's at the goalie after scoring a goal. You know the name of the single, don't you? The man don't give a...
No, you're not allowed to say
expletive. Bleep.
Yeah, the family show.
I brought that in as well, JP. But if you're ever down, mate, on your travels, pop in. You'll love it.
I know. I need to go. We parked the bus I was on last night. Parked outside Motherwell Concert Hall. You ever been to a gig there?
I haven't actually. No.
Neither have I. And it's kind of one that gets used every now and then, just for a band, like if they're not doing a Glasgow show and they want to do something a bit different. Like DMAs have played there, and
right.
the Snuts played there. I think Bell and Sebastian are playing there as well, or have played there.
What's the capacity? Something like 1,400, 1,200, something like that?
I think it's around about that, yeah.
We should go to Motherwell and do an Axon gig, eh? What do you think? Could do.
Well, I mean, I'd just like to go and see a gig there, full stop. It's just when you've not been to a venue to see a show, and it's just like, I'd never even been outside it. I didn't even know where it was. I couldn't have taken you to it in Motherwell until last night. And by the way, we were also nearly set upon by some Motherwell casuals.
What do they call themselves?
Casuals. I mean, they were like wee guys basically running around.
Have they got a name? Have they got like an ultra's name?
I think they might have. I couldn't really make out what was on their flag, but there was wee guys running around the bus getting chased by the police. It was all about Benny Hill.
Oh, brilliant! I love the one, the Falkirk young team. You know what they call themselves?
The Fear.
The Falkirk Fear.
Aye.
Who fears them? Who fears these guys?
On the wall. My mum was from Falkirk, and when I was at hers, and you'd see the Fear, like the Falkirk Fear, and then Class War, Bash the Rich. That was one of the like next.
So brilliant. So you fight other working class football fans. Tremendous. Yeah. For your political ideology. Superb. Ridiculizer. Abada seems to have a cloak of invisibility, not invincibility. That was Batfink on at times. Why he's not picked up as a clear and present danger so often is beyond me. I just think it's a skill. It's the awareness, JP, the instinctive awareness. I bet if you ask Abada about it, he couldn't explain it to you. It's just something he does. I
mean, his numbers are absolutely ridiculous when you think about his goal contribution. I don't know if his assists are anywhere near that ballpark, but for a guy in his position, the amount of goals that he scores, he's always there. And again, he's done it in big games as well. Maybe not Champions League, but he's scored against Rangers for fun, and he just is always there or thereabouts. And what a weapon to have at 21 years old. Wonder what his market value is. What would it be? I mean, the sort of money that gets banded around nowadays for players that do less than he does.
I know.
And he's 21. He's an international.
He's not a one-season wonder now. You can't say he was a flash in the pan. He's doing it consistently.
No, but it's just weird how he doesn't really ever. You never really come away from a game going, "Oh, Abada ran that game," or he terrorised them. For 90 minutes, he popped up for 2 minutes, scored 2 goals, and that's all he really did. But when someone's doing that, you can't really complain, can you? You've got to be appreciative of the fact that you've got him at this point in time, because he might not be able to hang on to something like that. Because if someone's consistently scoring goals from his position, they're not going to be ignored. They're going to get picked up. And I'm sure, is it Dudu Dahan was his agent?
He was, aye.
I'm sure Dudu Dahan's going to start sort of opening up the offers to probably English Premiership clubs at some point, looking for his next payday.
There will be various radars bleeping at the likes of Abada, that's for sure. I'm just thinking that, though, some of these guys who haven't really lit up the Champions League, save it for the Bernabeu. If Abada gets a goal and Kyogo and Giakoumakis, I think we might get a draw. So
I'm going to make it back for Madrid if we beat Madrid in Madrid. I'll probably end up missing every available method of transport back to Scotland because I'll not be in a fit state to do it.
Superb. Listen, it's always a pleasure on a Thursday, JP. I enjoy it immensely. Thank you everybody for getting involved in the comments. There's a few links underneath the video. We always ask you to like the video, give us a big thumbs up. It helps with, what do you call that thing again? Oh yeah, the algorithm. It helps with the algorithm, right? But we put a few links underneath the video. The first one is the Axom store. If you want to buy this jersey and a few other things that we do to fund what we do, then feel free to do that. All good quality stuff. You can also buy tickets for Bend It Like Bertie. That's Jim Orr's play. It's coming to Glasgow Pavilion in February. Ticket links underneath the video. If you want to see us live, get on that link and register as well, because we'll be going live every single month next year. Wee Jamie Tierney, his father was on the show recently. He's from Dunfermline, big Celtic fan as well, and they're raising funds for his wee lad's treatment. He needs to go to the States for that. And if you want to donate to St Mary's, the birthplace of Celtic, that GoFundMe is still open, and we've raised about 29 grand so far for St Mary's. So thank you everybody for getting involved, and thank you to JP Mason for joining me once again on A Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers, Paul.